The lead writer for the next Mass Effect is going to be you. You will get to decide if Shepard lives or dies. Your ending choice for Mass Effect 3 will matter. Why? Because the Mass Effect team has 2 people at its helm who will prioritize you having a significant impact on the next game's plot. Mary DeMarle and her boss, who we'll get to in a bit. First up, let's talk about Mary DeMarle, who was hired by BioWare in July of 2022 as their senior narrative director, which is basically like screaming to the Mass Effect fanbase, every single choice you've made is going to matter. Because as a storyteller, DeMarle values player choice above all else, shown with her previous work for the Deus Ex series, which heavily features freedom of choice. DeMarle was the executive narrative director of Deus Ex Human Revolution, which featured a monumental choice at the end of the game that affected the entire world. The choice was between 4 different options, each with 3 ending variations depending on how the player acted throughout the game. So this led to 12 different unique endings. Hila Salai, I thought Mass Effect 3's 4 endings was a lot. This game had 12? And regarding which choice and ending was the canon one in the sequel Deus Ex Mankind Divided, DeMarle had this to say: "What happened in Human Revolution, the so-called canon ending, is whatever you as a player did. The outcome of that event was mass confusion." Later down the article, we get even more insight on DeMarle's thoughts regarding narrative storytelling. "I'm a big fan of that narrative storytelling where you can tell the same story from 3 different eyes and you're like, wow, I never knew that. It's not as confining as some people think, and it spurs on a lot more creativity." So DeMarle's thoughts on branch storytelling and multiple ending outcomes are that it spurs more creativity, and canon ending type scenarios are based on a player's individual choices. Even crazy endings where there are 12 different variations. This is who's in charge of storytelling for the next Mass Effect, which is why I believe that no canon ending is going to be chosen for Mass Effect 3. I think we're going to be able to individually choose and experience the story we want to play in the next Mass Effect, because that's the way that DeMarle envisions storytelling. So who is DeMarle's boss that also wants you to write the next Mass Effect story? Project director, executive producer, and franchise director for Mass Effect, Mike Gamble. I actually didn't know that Gamble was the franchise director for Mass Effect until I glanced at his titles in the recent 2023 N7 Day blog post. But once I knew that he was, I realized that anything Gamble writes or tweets about should give us a pretty good indication of where the franchise of Mass Effect is headed. And we get a sneak peek at Gamble's thoughts on the infamous endings of Mass Effect 3 in that same blog post he released this past N7 Day. In a paragraph where Gamble lists out some questions fans have for the next game, Gamble mentions things like what a baby Volus sounds like and what about all the galaxies. However, in that same paragraph, he also writes the endings. Presumably, he's talking about the Mass Effect 3 endings, and he specifically pointed out endings, not ending. To me, this says that he's aware of our struggle-busing theories on whether a canon ending is going to be chosen. And because Mary DeMarle was hired, I don't think they're going to canonize any one ending. The ending we as players chose will probably be the ending that influences the start of the next game. So wait, if there's no canon ending, then what about Shepard? Or as Gamble put it, what about S? I'll cover the fate of our favorite galaxy-saving hero S, and whether we'll get to write them into the next game in a bit. But first, we have to talk about everybody's favorite Shepard wannabe, Conrad Verner, because whether or not Shepard is back might depend on what the Mass Effect team does about Conrad. In a quote tweet replying to Callah's companion likelihood in Mass Effect 5, Gamble took the time to copy and paste Conrad Verner across the entire bar of most likely to least likely of being in the next game, which made me immediately think of another huge contradiction I covered in my previous video. Mac Walters writing that, after our choice at the end of Mass Effect 3, Shepard was both alive and dead. Seems pretty similar to Conrad Verner being most likely to be seen and least likely. Basically, what I think Gamble has shrewdly alluded to here is that Conrad's fate depends on us, because in Mass Effect 2 and 3, Conrad can either live or die, depending on how we interact with him. So if Gamble took the time to copy and paste Conrad, a minor character, across a companion likelihood bar, then where on this bar would Gamble copy and paste our favorite galaxy-saving hero, Shepard? I personally think that another of Gamble's tweets holds the answer. And on a side note, next week I'll be covering the most confusing hint the Mass Effect team has given to us so far, the Geth in clothes. So make sure to subscribe if you want to catch that one. So here's the Gamble tweet. When asked if Liara is happy after all these years, Gamble replied with, "Happy? I mean, depends," which obviously is up for interpretation because he was intentionally vague. However, I think Liara's happiness being an unknown shows two very important things for the next game. The first thing is tied to Shepard's fate, and the second is on Gamble's own views on canonizing events from the trilogy. I personally think that the most important thing that would influence Liara's happiness is what happens to Shepard at the end of Mass Effect 3. And as covered in my previous video, Mac Walters himself wrote that Shepard's fate was in our hands. So, where would Liara's happiness stand if you chose Perfect Destroy, and Shepard somehow lived? Liara would probably be over the moon, since either her friend or lover has survived. But what if you didn't choose Perfect Destroy, and instead Shepard died? Well, as is the case in the majority of the endings, Liara's happiness is probably not doing so great, as we see in the extended cuts. So to me, what Gamble is implying with this tweet is that whatever ending choice we made, once again, Liara's happiness depends on us. Whatever choice we made will impact her happiness. This tweet, along with the previous Conrad tweet, leads me to think that Gamble's views on canonizing events from the trilogy is similar to DeMarle's. They both probably want the player to decide how things are in the next game, the state we left the galaxy in, whether Conrad lived or died, and even whether the Shadow Broker is happy or not. Our choices are king. So with all this being said, because of DeMarle's clear non-canon viewpoint and Gamble's non-canon jargon, there is a new theory that I believe in. The choice is king theory, and it only has two simple points. Nothing is going to be canonized, and every impactful choice we've made so far will matter in the next Mass Effect. Because I think that since Mary DeMarle and Mike Gamble are in charge, every Mass Effect fan will experience their own unique story in the next Mass Effect, because we're going to be the ones writing it. I am so excited for this upcoming slate of videos, because I'm going to finally start piecing together all the evidence and hints we've seen so far, starting with our new friend, the Geth in Clothes, next week. If you want to see some top secret evidence on why there might not be a canon ending in Mass Effect 3, then check out this video right over here. See you there.